Hello, back in business. Not quite June 22nd, but we're almost in June. Starts tomorrow, and thought it'd be a good time to play one of my top 10, which is actually Proud Monster by Compass Games. I forget exactly where it's sat on my list of 10, probably 7th or 8th or something. It's a game I have played a number of times, both solitaire and face to face. The hidden Russian strength for the vast majority of the Russian army makes it quite an exciting thing to do, sort of solitaire. You're, I guess, focusing on the German play a little bit, but that's probably true of most Barbarossa scenarios or games that start with the Barbarossa offensive. So it's all set up. I'll give you a look at the map in a minute. I'm going for the historical setup, which is the only one I've ever used actually with this game. I think the free setup may give you so many options, you might go into a bit of a flat spin, but I think the historical's fine. I use a couple of simple play aids, which are just really laminated sheets from various documents that are on either Board Game Geek or Consim World, and one is just the list of victory point hexes with the VP value and whether or not they are one of the district headquarters, which is important to record those because that affects the Russian replacement rate. Another one is the sheet, just to get a sort of dry white marker for these, and this lets you know when you can make your next seasonal offensive. I think you're allowed one every 6 months. Obviously starts with Barbarossa. In fact, I think the next German one is actually allowed in September. So that's a bit less than 6 months, isn't it? But I think after that it goes into basically, looks like actually more frequent than every 6 months. Maybe it's every 3 months. Okay, that's interesting. That's why it's useful having these things written down. And the bottom half of this sheet is the how the Soviets qualify for close combat markers, and they're really key in the game because the Russian stacking is only 3 units at the start of the game, and the Germans start with 5. And for the Russians to be able to get to 4 and then 5, they have to make attacks on the Axis units, and these are attacks of at least 2 to 1 or greater. You essentially earn 1 point, or if you manage to destroy a German division, you also get a point. And for every 6 points that you get, you earn 1 close combat marker, and that starts to add to your ability to stack. So when you've got your first 6 points, that increases your stacking limit to 4, and the next 6 it goes up to 5, and that's really important for the Russians to be able to hold on to a decent front line. So that's a nice historical bit of chrome, really, because it does mean that the Russians can't just run. Well, they can't run for 2 reasons. One is because there's a sudden death victory, so if you just bug out and run east, then the Germans will capture sufficient victory point cities to win the game early. And also you can't afford to do it because you need to earn your stacking rights, and that's quite a fine balance to make. I've seen sometimes Russian players tempted to overcommit and think, oh, because there are a lot of Russian units, and you think, oh, I'll just hold here for a bit longer and launch some attacks, but because the Russian units are generally slower, they just tend to get caught up in the surge, and really you're trying to conserve your forces as well. So it's a very tight balance to strike. The only other one I've got here, sheets, which is also available on BGG, was my attempt to summarise the reserve movement options and mobile assault entry costs. Because if you, what we would call an overrun in most games, if you mobile assault a hex, you mark the hex, and then any other units entering the hex in the same phase have to pay a cost in terms of movement points. And it's a little bit, the rules on reserves and mobile assault entry are spread over a number of pages, and it was a bit difficult to focus. So I put together a sheet which some chap on Board Game Geek said he couldn't make head nor tail of. I offered to assist and answer any questions he had, but he never got back. It's quite hard to do a single sheet summary and try and capture it all. Makes sense to me, but then I'm the author, so possibly it's not as crystal clear as it could be. So we'll see. There've been a few minor tweaks in the rules, which Don Johnson, the developer, still supports the game. In fact, there was a little bit of errata put up only yesterday regarding out of supply units and their supply trace, and whether they actually attrit or not if they're beyond the 14 mech movement points supply. The answer is that they do if they become isolated. One of the rules that mea culpa was the Russian fortification lines. These essentially trigger on fixed game turns, and it always struck me as being a bit odd, because the trigger for the line being created was the historical position of the German forces. So I made a case that actually the civilian population would have been mobilised earlier had the Germans have made their advances earlier. So it's just a timing thing, and presumably if they'd gone a different way and attacked in front of Moscow later, then these fortification lines would have appeared later. So there was a phase when the fortification lines were not fixed dates, and they essentially were triggered by the position of the German forces. But I think on reflection I got that wrong, and I'm pleased it's been reset to the rules as written, because actually what that does is that reduces the German options a little bit, because if you know that the defences in front of Moscow are always going to be up and running, then it does somewhat constrain the options for the Germans. They're much more likely to go for the southern drive, because they know there's no chance to get at Moscow early, because all these fortifications are just going to appear, and that becomes hard work. Whereas now, if you stick to the timeline as a fixed timeline, however slightly dodgy that might feel from an historical point of view, you may get the jump on the Russian defences, or maybe the first or the second defence line in front of Moscow, which now makes Moscow a viable target. And anything which gives the Germans options in terms of where they can go to get their win, I think is a good thing. So I'm pleased that's gone back to the original. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's set up. I'm just about to go. I think the best thing to do is to set up the Russians, then walk away from the table, come back and set up the Germans, and then just and start afresh. So let's have a look at the map. I'll start back here, just give you an idea of the expanse. You can see it is a monster in all senses of the word. This is just a bit bigger than a 6x4. This is about a 4 foot by 6 foot 4 board. So there's still plenty of space on the edges there for bits of clutter. So obviously we're looking at this from the Russian side. You'll see Moscow. These are the fortification lines that we were just talking about. So for example the Vyazma line there triggers on turn 117. That's the other slight confusing thing maybe for some people, and certainly for me at the start when I first got the game, was that the turn numberings are a little bit unusual. So 117 I think is like the 17th fortnight in 1941, as opposed to the Luger line, north and south Luger lines, which become active on turn 113. So that's the 13th fortnight of 1941. But you soon get your sort of head around the that sort of terminology. I just come around here. You'll see. So this is start line. The Russians are given interior forces and frontier forces and garrison forces, which restricts what they can do in certain areas. But here you can see Army Group North preparing to, should be able to take Riga on the first turn. First turn is by definition a seasonal offensive, and there are a few bonuses that come with that. So most of this Russian front line will just dissolve. You need to be careful that they don't get units advancing into the off-board zone. It's called a ZOMO, because that will actually give the Russians victory points. So you need to be careful that you don't give them any easy sort of fruit to pick. Group centre's pretty scary. The Russian panzer divisions have got 4 steps, as opposed to all the Russian units at the moment. They're all single steppers. I think the infantry divisions have got 3 steps, apart from the Jaegers and the sort of lighter and the sort of mounted infantry. But now we're coming down to Army Group South. Then you've got the Romanian front, which can't move on the first turn. Similarly, the Russian 9th Army on this sector, and anything within 3 hexes of Chinuti. Chinuti is just here. That's Chinuti there. So anything within 3 hexes of there is actually pinned as well. So what you're trying to do, you're trying to occupy these Stalin line hexes, which can't be overrun, and it also doesn't allow the German to negate their step loss against the Stalin line hex. But you don't want those troops there for longer than they need to be. So, if they're there, if the Russians have got the chance, you want to get them out, because there's some very important units there. That's the bulk of their motorised divisions and tank divisions in the south. So there we have it. It's a big place, and there's quite a tight schedule for the Germans in terms of victory points. They've really got to push right from the get-go. So we'll report back at some stage.